Hey guys, tonight we're stepping aboard a pirate ship. Now, this isn't the kind of ship where you're relaxing on a sun-drenched deck sipping cocktails. No, this is the real deal, and I'm about to take you on a journey where you'll quickly realize you probably won't survive this. Imagine yourself, standing at the edge of the dock, gazing at the old, weather-beaten vessel bobbing in the water. The pirates, clad in rough clothing, seem to call this dilapidated ship home. As you climb the rickety wooden plank and step aboard, a wave of odors hits you like a brick wall. The smell of salt water is mixed with something far less pleasant: sweat, grime, and the overpowering scent of rotting food. The stench is so thick you can almost taste it. It's everywhere. You take a deep breath, but there's no escaping it. This is your new reality. You look around, trying to get your bearings. The ship creaks underfoot, and the timbers are worn down from years of salty sea air. Everywhere you turn, the crew is busy, some tying ropes, others hauling crates, and a few tending to a fire. They hardly pay attention to your presence, too consumed by their own tasks. But it's clear that life here isn't easy. The pirate ship is a hard place. Every inch of space feels used, worn, and uncomfortable. The cramped quarters are barely big enough to move, and the few personal items you see are carelessly thrown in the corners. And just when you think it can't get any worse, you catch a glimpse of the crew. They're covered in dirt, their faces grimy and weathered from long days at sea. You see a few with long, tangled hair, some with patched clothes. The notion of adventure that you had in mind before boarding the ship begins to slip away, replaced by the harsh reality of life aboard a pirate ship. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're feeling brave, post where you're from and what time it is there. Let's see how far this journey goes. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. As you try to shake off the initial shock of the smell and the sight, the reality of pirate life begins to settle in. It's not as glamorous as you thought. In fact, the pirate life is brutal, and as you look around, you can see the evidence. The life aboard this ship is one of constant labor, where every crew member is expected to contribute or face the consequences. The pirate's workday starts long before the sun rises and doesn't end until it sets, if it even does then. From the moment you wake up, you're immediately put to work. Whether it's scrubbing the deck, helping with the sails, or hauling heavy barrels, there's no room for laziness. And don't think for a moment that there's any sort of luxury or ease either. You are expected to work until your muscles ache and your body begs for rest, and then you're expected to do it all over again the next day. One of the more grueling aspects of pirate life is the constant danger of being caught in a battle. You could be sailing along one day, with the sea calm and your thoughts on your next meal, and the next thing you know, the ship is under attack. There are cannons, shouting orders, and the sharp scent of gunpowder fills the air. The tension on the ship rises, and you quickly realize how little control you have over your fate. But even more dangerous than the battles is the life-threatening fatigue that comes with the job. You're not getting enough sleep, your muscles are sore, and the weight of the work begins to wear you down mentally as well. The pirates aren't resting in soft beds. They're sleeping on the cold, hard wood of the ship's floor, with nothing but a thin, damp blanket to cover them. The only comfort you'll find is the fleeting moments when the waves lull you to sleep, but that doesn't last long before you're jolted awake to work again. Historians still argue whether pirates were more ruthless than the sailors they fought against. Some argue that pirates lived for the thrill of the chase, while others claim it was simply survival. Do what it takes to live another day. If you think you could handle the hours of labor, consider that you're not just a worker, You're now part of a crew where everyone is in it for themselves. Pirates had a reputation for being independent and distrustful of authority, but that meant the crew was often fragmented, and there was little camaraderie to rely on. You'll quickly find out that if you aren't pulling your weight, you could become a target for bullying or worse, getting thrown overboard. It's a harsh, lonely life. But the worst part? There's no escape. You're stuck here, aboard this pirate ship, until they decide to let you go, or until the sea decides your fate. The work never stops. You can feel the weight of the endless tasks pressing down on you, but there's no chance to take a break. The ship creaks underfoot, a constant reminder of how precarious your position is. As you look around at the pirates laboring just as hard, you realize there's no comfort here. The thought of a soft bed or a warm, peaceful home feels like a distant dream, and the reality of pirate life becomes clearer with every passing hour. Let's talk about sleep, or rather, the lack of it. Picture this. After an exhausting day of work, you're finally ready to sleep, but there's no warm bed waiting for you, no pillows to sink into, no soft sheets to wrap yourself in. Instead, you're relegated to the cold, hard floor of the ship's hold, or the open deck, where the only thing separating you from the rough wood is your thin, tattered blanket, if you're lucky. The rest of the crew is scattered around you, sleeping in similarly uncomfortable conditions, and the only sound is the creaking of the ship and the crash of waves against the hull. And the smell? Well, that's another story. The stench of unwashed bodies, moldy wood, and stale air fills every corner of the ship, lingering on your clothes, in your hair, and even in your lungs. It's a constant reminder that comfort and cleanliness are not a part of life here. The worst part? The noise. The pirates don't sleep quietly. There's the rustle of movement, the coughs and sneezes, and the occasional murmur or shout in the middle of the night. You close your eyes, desperate for rest, but you're jerked awake by the sound of someone stumbling into you, or the slap of the waves against the ship. In addition to the discomfort of your sleeping conditions, there's the constant sense of danger that hangs in the air. A pirate ship isn't a peaceful, tranquil place to sleep. It's a place where anything can happen at any moment. You never know when the ship could encounter another pirate vessel, or worse, when a sudden storm might throw you into the heart of a tempest. So, you try to get some rest, but the tension never quite leaves you. It's hard to sleep soundly when you're constantly wondering if you'll wake up to a fight, a flood, or even the sea swallowing the ship whole. Historians have long debated how pirates were able to keep their morale up in such grim conditions. Some believe that the camaraderie and shared hardships gave pirates a sense of purpose, while others argue that it was the thrill of treasure hunting and the occasional indulgence in rum that kept them going. So, there you are, lying on the floor, trying to fall asleep in the midst of all this chaos. You're exhausted, but sleep doesn't come easily. It's hard to get comfortable when your body aches, your mind is racing, and the ship's creaks and groans are a constant reminder of how fragile your situation is. Yet, somehow, you manage to drift off for a few hours before the cycle starts again. It's a rough life, to say the least, and it doesn't take long for the harsh reality to set in. Surviving aboard this pirate ship is about endurance, grit, and accepting that comfort is a luxury you simply won't have. As you wake up the next morning, the ache in your body hits you immediately. The exhaustion from a night of restless sleep lingers, but there's no time to rest. There's always something that needs doing. You roll out of your makeshift bed, stiff and sore, and start preparing for another day of labor. A glance around confirms what you already know. The pirate ship isn't exactly a place for health and hygiene. First, there's the issue of food. When you think of pirates, you probably imagine rum and a hearty stew with chunks of meat and vegetables. Well, forget about that. If you're lucky, the meal you'll get today will be a small, stale piece of bread, maybe a bit of salted meat, if you can stomach it, and some water that may or may not have come from a questionable source. Water on a pirate ship is not exactly clean. It's often murky and kept in barrels that aren't exactly well maintained. You don't get to choose what you eat, and if you complain about it, you're told to just deal with it. Everyone's hungry after all. And then there's the dreaded scurvy. You didn't think you'd be worried about vitamin C deficiency on a pirate ship, did you? Well, the truth is, pirates were notorious for their poor diets, and scurvy was a constant threat. With little to no fresh fruits or vegetables on board, pirates would often develop this disease, which causes symptoms like swollen gums, fatigue, and even death if left untreated. It's no surprise that many pirates would become severely ill, and some would simply not survive the long voyages. But that's the least of your worries at this point. Just hope that the crew doesn't run out of food entirely, or you'll find yourself scrounging for anything that resembles a meal. As for hygiene, well, there's none of that either. You don't have the luxury of a nice bath or a hot shower. You might get a chance to wash your face or rinse off some salt water on deck, but that's about it. Pirates didn't have soap or fresh water to bathe in. Their clothes were rarely washed, and the smell of sweat, dirt, and sea salt clung to their skin. It's impossible to keep anything clean for long, and you quickly realize that personal hygiene is the last thing on anyone's mind. The ship itself is a breeding ground for disease, and even minor cuts and scrapes are a serious risk, as they could quickly become infected. Historians still argue whether pirates' general disregard for hygiene was due to the harsh conditions of life at sea, or whether it was simply a result of their overall chaotic lifestyle. What's clear is that, in the absence of proper care, many pirates suffered from various ailments that no one really had the time or resources to deal with. The idea of fresh food, clean water, and even just a moment of peace seems almost like a fantasy now. But beyond the physical toll on your body, there's the mental exhaustion. Every day is filled with the relentless grind of labor and the ever-present worry about what the day will bring. You never know when you might encounter another ship, or when a storm could sweep in and turn everything upside down. And yet, despite it all, you have no choice but to keep going. You can't afford to stop or show weakness. Pirates don't have time for that. You begin to realize that the pirate ship isn't just a place of physical discomfort. It's a constant mental and emotional struggle as well. The stress of never knowing what's next, the constant fear of dying at sea, the exhaustion that keeps building, it's all enough to break a person. But there's no escape. Once you're aboard, you're in it for the long haul, and the only way out is either through death or retirement, if you're lucky. It doesn't take long for you to realize that the pirate ship's leadership is as unforgiving as the conditions you're enduring. The captain, a figurehead of authority, is not someone you'd want to cross. In fact, most pirates operate under a strict hierarchy, and that hierarchy doesn't leave much room for questioning. Pirates may have had their own codes of conduct, but those were often flexible when it came to the captain's orders. When the captain speaks, you obey, or else. Pirate captains were known to be ruthless. This wasn't a place where you could voice your opinion freely, or even make mistakes without consequences. The idea of being demoted or punished in a way that left you with scars, physical or otherwise, was a daily reality. If the captain's orders weren't followed to the letter, punishments range from flogging to being locked in the ship's dark and cramped hold, with nothing but rats and damp air for company. Some pirates would be sent overboard for offenses as minor as failing to deliver a satisfactory performance during a raid. In a strange way, you come to understand that survival aboard the ship is all about keeping your head down and not drawing attention to yourself. You may have joined the crew looking for riches and adventure, but you quickly find that it's more about staying alive than anything else. It's all about maintaining a low profile and making sure you do your share of work. Speak up too much, question too many decisions, and you might find yourself walking the plank sooner than you expected. And while the captain's word is law, you realize there are also unwritten codes that the crew follows, though they are often broken at the captain's whim. For instance, pirates often swore a code of loyalty to each other, known as the Pirate Code or Articles of Agreement. It guaranteed certain rights, like voting on major decisions or getting an equal share of the loot. But these codes were often ignored, especially when it came to the captain's personal desires. If the crew was dissatisfied with the loot split, or an unjust decision was made, it could lead to mutiny. In fact, pirates were notorious for their ability to stage quick uprisings if they felt the captain was abusing his power. However, those rebellions were dangerous, often resulting in more severe punishments or even execution. Historians still argue whether the pirate code was a real and enforceable system, or whether it was merely a convenient story created by pirates to justify their behavior. Some believe the code was simply a way for pirates to pacify the crew during times of peace, only to be disregarded when a real fight or a treasure was involved. Others claim that the code was the only thing keeping order in a world that could have descended into chaos. You begin to notice that the captain isn't alone in holding the reins of power. Some of the senior crew members, first mates, quartermasters, and boatswains, also have considerable authority over your daily duties. While the captain may rule with an iron fist, the lieutenants maintain discipline in a more hands-on way, ensuring that work is done and that the pirates don't get too rowdy. They enforce the captain's will, but they can also be more personal in their methods, using intimidation or outright bullying to ensure compliance. This structure works most of the time, but every once in a while, a spark of rebellion flares up, usually from a disgruntled crew member who's had enough of the brutal treatment or is looking for a way to get ahead. These are the moments when the tension reaches its peak, and you wonder if the ship's crew will implode from within before the dangers of the open sea even get the chance to do it. As the days stretch on, the ever-present threat of death becomes one of your closest companions. On a pirate ship, death isn't something to be feared in an abstract sense. It's a looming, inevitable part of life. Whether it's the constant danger of battles with rival ships, the risk of storms, or the deadly diseases that lurk in the unsanitary conditions, death is never far from your mind. The most immediate threat comes from the sea itself. The unpredictable nature of the ocean means that no matter how well you think you've prepared, it could turn against you at any moment. Even calm waters can suddenly become a stormy nightmare. You've seen it happen before. One moment, the sky is clear, the crew is working in relative peace, and the next, dark clouds roll in, the wind picks up, and the ship begins to rock violently. The thunder crashes, and the waves rise like mountains, swallowing up the ship's hull as the crew scrambles to secure the rigging and make sure the sails are intact. If you're unlucky enough to be caught in the middle of a storm, it's not just your ship you're fighting for. Your life is on the line. But there are other, more subtle ways that death could catch you. Diseases like scurvy, malaria, and dysentery were rampant aboard pirate ships, and they could kill you far quicker than a sword ever could. Without proper nutrition, and with little access to fresh water or medical supplies, even a minor wound could turn into a life-threatening infection. Pirates were often forced to rely on herbal remedies, and in the absence of antibiotics, a simple scratch could lead to gangrene or worse. You can feel it every time you wash your hands with seawater or swallow another mouthful of bad food. You're playing a deadly game of chance. If you're lucky, you won't fall ill. If you're unlucky, your fate could be sealed by a disease that spreads quickly in the confined spaces of the ship. Historians debate the actual mortality rate among pirates, with some claiming that it was shockingly high, while others suggest that many pirates lived long, relatively healthy lives despite the conditions. Regardless, the fact remains. The pirate life was a dangerous one, and death was always just a wave away. The most violent and obvious threat, of course, comes from battles at sea. As a pirate, you're often engaged in skirmishes with other ships, whether it's attacking merchant vessels for their cargo or engaging in bloody showdowns with other pirate crews. In these battles, your life is on the line. Cannons roar, muskets fire, and swords clash. You're forced to fight not just for treasure, but for survival. Even if you're not the one to meet your end in battle, there's always the chance of being wounded severely. And pirates didn't have the luxury of proper medical care. If you were injured, you were left to deal with it the best you could, hoping that you didn't succumb to infection or bleeding out. As the days stretch on, the constant fear of dying becomes a part of the rhythm of life on the ship. There's no peace here, no sense of safety. You are constantly reminded that your life is hanging by a thread. The sea, the weather, the crew, and the risks of violence all converge to create a world where survival is a daily struggle. You begin to see that, in many ways, pirates lived more on borrowed time than on any actual sense of security. The constant threats to your life are a reminder that every day could be your last. And the worst part is, you can't escape it. There's no way to leave the ship unless the captain allows it, and that's a rare occurrence. In many ways, you begin to wonder if the true treasure of pirate life isn't gold or jewels, but simply the ability to survive each day. Navigating the seas is another beast entirely, one that you quickly realize requires every ounce of your focus and skill. You might have joined the crew thinking pirate life was all about treasure hunting and grand adventures, but now you're learning the cold truth. Navigating these vast, unpredictable waters is a dangerous game. Even the most experienced sailors are at the mercy of the elements, and as a pirate, the stakes couldn't be higher. The ship's course is determined by the winds, tides, and currents, which seem to shift without warning. The vast ocean is a maze, with no signposts, no road maps, just endless waves stretching to the horizon. As a crew member, you learn to rely on the ship's navigator, but even the best can make mistakes. The slightest error in judgment or misreading of the stars can result in getting lost for days, weeks, or even longer. In the days before modern navigation, pirates didn't have GPS or accurate maps. They had a few basic instruments like compasses and sextants, but even those were unreliable at times. One of the biggest challenges pirates faced was the constant threat of getting caught in the doldrums, areas of the ocean where there is no wind at all. The ship would be stuck, unable to move for days or weeks, wasting precious time and resources. In these moments, the frustration would build. The crew would begin to turn on each other, tempers flaring as the heat and lack of progress wore everyone down. It's not just a matter of being stuck in place, it's a matter of survival. Supplies start running low, the risk of scurvy grows, and tensions rise. Even worse, pirates had to contend with the possibility of running aground, either on a hidden reef or a sandbar. The damage to the ship could be catastrophic, and in the worst case, the entire crew could be stranded on an uninhabited island at the mercy of the elements or worse, other hostile pirate crews. The ship itself, while a marvel of human ingenuity in its time, is a fragile vessel in the face of the raging sea. But it's not just the pirates who you have to worry about. Navigating the seas also means that rival pirate ships are always a threat. Every pirate crew is looking for their next target, and the thought of stumbling upon another pirate vessel can send a cold shiver down your spine. You've heard the stories of pirate ships chasing each other down, cannons firing, and the violent chaos that follows. These ships aren't just after treasure, they're after your life. As you settle into the role of navigator's assistant, learning the ropes and the stars, you begin to appreciate the skill it takes to keep the ship afloat and moving in the right direction. The knowledge of the tides, the ability to read the sky, and the calm under pressure, all of it is necessary for surviving this life. Pirates weren't just plundering thieves, they were expert sailors, forced to know everything about the sea to stay alive. And then there's the matter of the weather. When the winds are with you, it feels like a blessing. But when they're against you, that's when you really feel the weight of the ocean. The ship creaks, the sails strain, and you have to work twice as hard to keep the course. The weather, unpredictable and ever-changing, adds yet another layer of danger to the pirate's already perilous existence. One bad storm, and you could find yourself at the mercy of the waves, stranded or worse, sinking into the abyss. As you watch the crew adjust the sails, steady the rudder, and adjust to the wind's fickle whims, you begin to understand the true burden of a pirate's life. It's not just the battles, the treasure hunts, or the hardships on the ship. It's the relentless struggle to keep the ship moving, to avoid the dangers of the ocean, and to stay alive long enough to see another day. The sea is a harsh mistress, and no one ever truly masters it. If you thought pirate life meant constant feasts of gold and jewels, think again. A pirate's daily diet is far from glamorous, and the reality of what you'll be eating quickly sinks in. The notion of grand pirate-themed meals, platters of fruit, roasted meats, and goblets of rum is a fantasy. The truth is, pirates often struggled to find enough food to sustain themselves, and when they did, it was far from appetizing. The typical pirate meal was a mixture of hardtack, salted meat, and whatever meager provisions the ship could afford. Hardtack, a dry and rock-hard biscuit, was the staple of every pirate's diet. It could survive for months or even years, making it the perfect food for long voyages. But the downside? Hardtack was as tasteless as cardboard, and if it wasn't stored properly, it could become infested with weevils. The pirates didn't exactly have a gourmet palate, so they simply ate it, though it was often dipped in water or whatever liquid they could find just to make it a little more bearable. Salted meat was another common item. Pirates often had to rely on salted fish, beef, or pork as their main protein source. The meat was preserved in a salt, which meant it was nearly inedible until it was soaked for hours to remove some of the saltiness. Imagine chewing through a tough, salty piece of meat with no seasoning or variety. It's no wonder that scurvy, caused by a lack of fresh fruits and vegetables, was rampant among pirates. And let's not forget the water. Fresh water was a commodity on pirate ships, and it was rationed carefully. The crew would often rely on water stored in barrels, but it wasn't always fresh or clean. If the barrels weren't properly sealed, the water would become stale and foul-tasting, often contaminated by the wood of the barrel or even the sea air. To make matters worse, there were no filtration systems, and pirates couldn't afford to be picky about what they drank. You'd be lucky if the water didn't cause stomach issues. Historians still argue over how pirates managed to survive without proper nutrition for extended periods. Some suggest that the pirate diet was a result of necessity, a way to make do with what they could find at sea. Others believe pirates were just as resourceful as they were ruthless, using their survival skills to turn even the most unpalatable provisions into something they could sustain themselves on. But food wasn't the only thing that pirates had to worry about. The physical toll of their diet, combined with the grueling work and lack of rest, meant that their bodies were constantly at risk of breaking down. You quickly realize that pirates weren't living the high life. They were struggling to survive every day. The lack of proper nutrition led to many pirates falling ill, becoming weak, and dying from diseases that could have been easily prevented with better resources. The lack of proper food and water made the already dangerous pirate life even harder. Without enough to eat or drink, you begin to understand just how fragile your survival is. And the worst part? There's no end in sight. As the days blur together, you start to lose track of time, and all you can think about is the next meal, the next gulp of water, the next moment of relief from the constant hunger and thirst. But there's no escape. You're stuck in this cycle, constantly working, constantly hungry, constantly thirsty, and all the while, the ship sails on, relentlessly heading into the unknown. By now, you've been around the ship long enough to observe the diverse and often rather chaotic crew that surrounds you. Pirate ships weren't exactly made up of heroic adventurers. Instead, they were manned by an assortment of criminals, outcasts, and desperate souls. This ragtag group is made up of men and women who were often forced into piracy, either as a last resort or as a way to escape something worse. It's clear that while pirates may have shared a common goal of treasure and freedom, they had little else in common. The crew is as diverse as the ship itself. You've got seasoned sailors who know the ins and outs of navigating treacherous waters, but you've also got criminals who were thrown into the life of piracy after being shunned by society. Some were former soldiers, others ex-merchants, and still others were captured slaves who saw the pirate life as a way to regain control of their destiny. There's a sense of camaraderie among the crew, but it's often built on mutual distrust rather than friendship. At times, the atmosphere aboard the ship is tense. The pirates might work together to keep the ship afloat and find treasure, but there's no mistaking the fact that every man is ultimately out for himself. Loyalty to the crew is secondary to loyalty to oneself. That's why mutiny is always a looming threat. If the conditions get too harsh, or if the spoils aren't shared equally, a crew member might decide to rise up and challenge the captain or other leaders. This tension makes the ship feel like a powder keg, always on the brink of explosion. In fact, pirate ships were often marked by power struggles. The title of captain could be claimed by force, not birthright, and pirates would sometimes replace their captain if they felt the leadership was weak or corrupt. The pirate code may have promised equality and fairness, but in practice, it was often only as strong as the captain's will to enforce it. Pirates could vote on significant matters like whether to engage in battle or which ship to attack, but when it came to the division of loot, all bets were off. The stronger or more influential members of the crew, those with more experience or charisma, tended to get the lion's share of the treasure. Historians still debate the extent to which pirate crews were truly democratic. Some scholars argue that pirates lived in a kind of proto-socialist society, where they shared equally in the spoils and had a say in decisions. Others claim that pirate ships were just as brutal as the societies they fled from, where those at the top kept the majority of the treasure for themselves, and the lower-ranked members had little say in anything. At any rate, this constant power struggle leads to some unpredictable behavior among the crew. You've seen pirates come to blows over nothing, arguments over food, disputes over the division of treasure, or even personal grudges that escalate into violent fights. Every man aboard the ship has his own agenda, and that makes for a volatile environment where trust is a luxury. Despite the tension, there's also a sense of reliance among the crew. You begin to realize that, whether you like it or not, you depend on the other pirates just to survive. There's no way to escape the ship, so your life is bound to theirs. A strange bond forms, not out of affection, but out of necessity. You're all in this together, and though you may not trust each other, you'll defend each other in the face of a greater threat. But as you look around, you can't shake the feeling that this is all a game of survival, and in a game like this, you're constantly wondering who will turn on whom first. Navigating the pirate code is a strange and paradoxical experience. You'd think that pirates, with their rebellious nature and disregard for the law, would have thrown out any notion of rules and regulations. But surprisingly, there was a pirate code, a set of rules that governed everything from how treasure was divided to what behaviors were acceptable on board. However, this code wasn't exactly a system of universal justice. Instead, it was a somewhat loosely adhered to collection of agreements that kept order, on paper at least. At first glance, the pirate code might seem like something straight out of a romanticized version of piracy, offering equality and fairness to all pirates. Each pirate was entitled to a share of the loot, and they had the right to vote on major decisions, including whether to engage in battle, who to attack, and how to divide the treasure. But as you soon discover, the code was often only as good as the captain's word. The pirate hierarchy was in place, and if you didn't have the captain's favor, your voice would rarely be heard. Some historians argue that the pirate code was a necessary measure for maintaining order among a crew of misfits. After all, when you're stuck on a ship with a bunch of criminals and outcasts, it makes sense to have a few ground rules to ensure some sense of fairness. But in practice, the code wasn't always followed. There were constant violations of its terms, and it didn't take much for a pirate to bend or break the rules for personal gain. In some cases, pirates would turn on each other over the smallest disagreements, such as whether to keep a captured ship for themselves or sell it for a share of the bounty. The most common violation of the pirate code, however, was the division of treasure. The agreement was that the loot would be divided equally among the crew, but that didn't always happen. Pirates who were higher in rank, like the quartermaster or the captain, often took a larger share of the treasure, while the rest of the crew made do with smaller portions. The pirate code might have promised equality, but the reality was that the strong took what they could, and the weak were left with whatever scraps were left over. Another aspect of the pirate code that often went unheeded was the concept of punishment for violations. The code had specific rules about how to handle pirates who broke the rules, ranging from flogging to being marooned on a deserted island. But more often than not, the punishment was meted out depending on the whims of the captain or the mood of the crew. Some pirates managed to escape punishment entirely, while others were subjected to harsh, sometimes fatal, consequences. This selective enforcement of the code left many pirates feeling frustrated and distrustful of their fellow crew members. The promises of fairness and equality faded quickly as they realized that the pirate ship was, in many ways, just another version of the world they had left behind. The power dynamics on board were as brutal as any kingdom, and the pirate code was little more than a fragile agreement that could be broken at any moment. In fact, the pirate code was often rewritten, modified, or ignored depending on the situation. If a pirate was caught stealing from the crew or causing trouble, the captain had the final say on what happened. The crew might mutiny against the captain, but that was rare. Most pirates, for all their rebelliousness, knew that breaking the code too flagrantly could result in their own death. You begin to understand that the code is more a guideline than a law, and it's really only as strong as the loyalty of the crew and the fear of the captain. At the end of the day, it's clear that the pirate code was a double-edged sword. It offered a sense of order and unity in an otherwise chaotic environment, but it also served as a tool for the strong to dominate the weak. The promise of equality was just a mask to keep the peace, and in the harsh world of piracy, fairness was as fleeting as a calm day at sea. Life on deck is far from relaxing. In fact, it's the opposite of everything you might imagine a pirate ship to be. Forget about lounging in the sun or enjoying a sea breeze. Instead, you're constantly working. There is always something that needs to be done, something to keep the ship moving, to keep it afloat, to keep the crew from going mad, and the work never stops, not even when the sun sets. From the moment you wake up, there are ropes to be pulled, sails to be adjusted, and barrels to be moved. Even when you're not actively working, the ship requires your attention, whether it's repairing the hull, cleaning the decks, or scrubbing the guns. Everyone has their task, and it's hard to escape the endless cycle of maintenance and labor that keeps the ship running. But it's not just about the hard work. Life on deck is about keeping everything in order. There's a strange routine that everyone falls into, with each pirate knowing their role and sticking to it, despite the fact that no one is really happy about it. The ship is its own little world, and as much as pirates may boast about their freedom, they are, in reality, slaves to the ship's daily demands. Even the slightest mistake could result in a delay, or, worse, a catastrophe. You can't afford to mess up when lives are on the line. One of the most exhausting parts of life on deck is the constant vigilance. While there may be moments of respite when the crew works in relative peace, there's always the underlying tension. Every creak of the ship, every rustle of the wind, could signal the arrival of another ship. The watchman on the crow's nest scans the horizon, and every pirate keeps an eye out for any potential danger. Pirates lived on the edge, always aware that at any moment their ship could be attacked, or worse, boarded by enemy forces. The constant readiness for battle is mentally and physically taxing, and when you're not working or on alert, you're still engaged in the business of survival. Pirates are not, after all, just sailors. They are criminals. That means the rules of the outside world don't apply to them. The moment a pirate crosses you or causes trouble, you have to be ready to deal with it. Mutiny is always a real possibility on a pirate ship, and the crew is kept in line by the threat of punishment. If you want to avoid trouble, you have to keep your head down and your mouth shut, especially when things start getting tense. Life on deck isn't just a matter of hard labor and constant threat. It's about maintaining a balance between work, survival, and the ever-present undercurrent of distrust that flows between crew members. Even when everyone is working together, there's always the knowledge that any pirate could turn on you at any moment, whether for personal gain or simply because they were bored. Trust is a rare commodity aboard a pirate ship, and it's something that you'll never truly be able to rely on. You begin to understand that the constant work on deck isn't just a way of keeping the ship moving. It's a way of keeping everyone from going mad. The endless tasks, the labor, the constant vigilance, all serve to distract you from the brutal reality that you're stuck on a ship with people you barely know, with nothing but the open sea ahead and a long road to nowhere. It's a strange paradox. The pirates are free from the constraints of society, but they are still bound to the unforgiving rhythm of life on deck. Freedom, it seems, comes with a heavy price. As if the physical exhaustion and mental strain weren't enough, pirates also face threats from beyond the ship, on land. When you first boarded the pirate ship, you may have thought that life on the open sea would be a kind of liberation from the strict rules of society. But what you didn't realize is that pirates had enemies, many enemies, and the threat of danger was never confined to the sea. Rival pirate crews, bounty hunters, and the Navy were constant threats that loomed just beyond the horizon. Pirates were always on the lookout for rival ships, which could attack at any moment. It wasn't just about treasure, though that was, of course, a big part of it. It was also about survival. There was no honor among thieves, and if another crew felt that they could overpower yours, they would do so without hesitation. In fact, many pirate ships were armed to the teeth, prepared for battle at any given moment. There were no rules of engagement, no regulations, just the cold, brutal reality that you fought to live or died trying. Then, of course, there was the looming threat of the authorities. While pirates were feared and often revered in some circles, the larger world was always trying to capture or kill them. The British Navy, for example, had a specific mandate to hunt down pirates. They were relentless, often going to great lengths to chase down pirate ships and eliminate the crews. No pirate ship was truly safe, even when it was far from civilization. You were always on the lookout for a Navy vessel that could show up out of nowhere, putting your life at risk. The moment you spot a Navy ship on the horizon, the atmosphere on board shifts dramatically. The crew's pace quickens, the ship moves into full battle readiness, and everyone braces themselves for the fight that's coming. You know that if you're caught, you may face the gallows, or worse, be dragged back to port in chains. Pirates had no rights, no protection under the law. They were fugitives, living on the fringes of society, always at risk of being hunted down. But even the pirates who managed to avoid capture weren't completely safe. They also had to watch their backs when they came ashore. Port towns and islands may have offered temporary refuge, but pirates couldn't be certain that they wouldn't be betrayed or captured by local authorities or bounty hunters. The townspeople, often desperate for money, would gladly turn in a pirate for a hefty reward. Even if the pirates had the promise of freedom, the fear of betrayal made every moment ashore tense and uncertain. Historians still debate whether pirates were ever really as feared as they were portrayed, or if the threat of the authorities was exaggerated. Some believe pirates were more successful at evading capture than we give them credit for, while others argue that the fear of the law kept pirates in a constant state of paranoia, even when they were far from civilization. Either way, the constant threat of enemy pirate crews, bounty hunters, and the Navy made life on a pirate ship a constant battle for survival. When you're not fighting to stay afloat or working to keep the ship running, you're worrying about where the next attack might come from. The seas are vast, but they're also dangerous. And the knowledge that you're never truly safe, whether on land or sea, is a weight that grows heavier with every passing day. Pirate justice is swift and harsh, and it's a reality you quickly learn to respect, whether you want to or not. In the world of pirates, there's no room for debates, no lengthy trials, and certainly no appeals. The captain's word is law, and when a pirate violates the code or crosses a line, punishment comes quickly, often brutally. It's not about fairness or a sense of mercy. It's about maintaining control and keeping the ship running smoothly. The consequences for breaking the rules are as varied as the crimes themselves, but they all have one thing in common: they are not pretty. One of the most infamous forms of punishment on a pirate ship is the flogging. A pirate who breaks the rules or fails in his duties might find himself tied to the mast, his back exposed to the whip. Flogging was a common punishment for things like mutiny, disobedience, or cowardice in battle. The lash would tear through the skin, leaving the pirate bloodied and in agonizing pain. It was a reminder to everyone that no one was above the law, especially not a pirate. But flogging isn't the worst punishment that pirates feared. For serious offenses, the punishment could be far worse: being marooned on a deserted island. It's a fate worse than death, a cruel form of banishment where the pirate is left alone with no food, no shelter, and no hope of survival. The island might be far from civilization, with nothing but the scorching sun and the brutal elements to contend with. Many pirates who were marooned never made it off the island, and the ones who did often came back with haunting stories of their time, stranded, sometimes barely alive. Then there's the ultimate penalty: death. The pirate's life was a dangerous one, and death was always a possibility. If a pirate's crime was severe enough, such as betraying the crew or leading them into a hopeless battle, death was often the only solution. The execution was typically quick, with the pirate being hanged or shot, and the crew would be left to move on, carrying on with their lives as if nothing had happened. In a world where death was a constant presence, it's easy to see why pirates could be so cold and detached when it came to their own kind. But while the punishments might seem severe, they also served a function. Pirate crews had to remain tightly controlled, especially when they lived under the constant threat of violence and mutiny. If a pirate stepped out of line, it could lead to disaster for everyone on board. Punishing rule breakers was a way to maintain order and ensure that the crew didn't descend into chaos. Every pirate knew the risks of being on a ship like this. The consequences for stepping out of line were always looming, and everyone understood the price of disobedience. Historians still argue about whether pirates were more brutal than the governments and navies they fought against. Some claim that pirate justice was more humane, pointing to the idea of the pirate code and the occasional fairness in dividing treasure. Others suggest that pirates were just as ruthless as the institutions they sought to overthrow, and that their justice was just another way of maintaining control through fear and punishment. In any case, life aboard a pirate ship is one of constant tension, where the threat of violence is always present. Whether it's from the captain's whip or from the crew's willingness to take drastic action against those who break the rules, you quickly learn that pirate justice is not about fairness or mercy. It's about survival, and that means maintaining control at any cost. As you've no doubt come to realize by now, pirates and treasure don't always go hand in hand. Sure, pirate stories are full of images of chests overflowing with gold coins and glittering jewels, but the reality is far less glamorous. The truth is, pirate treasure was rare and, more often than not, elusive. While pirates were undoubtedly adept at capturing ships and raiding coastal towns, the wealth they acquired was often meager, fleeting, and far from the legendary hoards you've heard about. Most of the time, pirates didn't find themselves with chests filled with gold. The loot was often far less glamorous: supplies, weapons, rum, or maybe a few small valuables. Occasionally, a big haul might come along, such as a rich merchant vessel carrying cargo like silks, spices, or rare artifacts. But even those moments were fleeting, and the treasure wasn't always easy to divide. After all, a ship could only carry so much, and the spoils of a successful raid had to be divided among the entire crew. When you think about it, the pirate treasure you've heard about is more a product of myth than reality. Sure, there were legendary pirate captains like Blackbeard, who amassed significant wealth during their careers. But even they were often living a life of constant struggle, looking for the next big score. The treasure wasn't as easy to come by as stories would have you believe. It was a dream that kept pirates going, but the reality was much grimmer. Most pirates lived in harsh conditions, working tirelessly for whatever scraps they could find. Then, there's the issue of hiding the treasure. Pirates didn't have the luxury of simply piling up their loot in a vault and walking away. They had to stash it away, bury it on some remote island, or hide it in some secret location, often with the hope of returning for it later. The problem is, by the time pirates had a chance to retire or claim their treasure, they were often dead, either killed in battle, executed by the authorities, or marooned somewhere, never to be heard from again. Pirate treasure, for the most part, remained an elusive fantasy. Historians still debate whether the myth of pirate treasure, buried and hidden in secret locations, was a real practice or simply a concoction of the pirate stories told to children. Some argue that pirates may have hidden some of their loot in remote places, but it was often stolen goods that were quickly spent or used to fund the crew's lifestyle. Others suggest that the treasure maps and tales of buried riches were exaggerations meant to keep the legend alive long after the pirates were gone. As you look around the ship, it's easy to see that the promise of treasure isn't what's keeping everyone going. It's the daily grind of survival. Even if you did manage to strike it rich with a big haul, that treasure would probably be spent before you could enjoy it. Pirates didn't have the luxury of sitting back and admiring their wealth. Instead, they lived day by day, on the run from the law, on the hunt for the next big score, always moving, always fighting. So, while the idea of pirate treasure is tempting and exciting, the truth is, the treasure most pirates found was fleeting, often unattainable, and rarely enjoyed. The real treasure of pirate life wasn't gold or jewels. It was the brief moments of freedom that came with a life lived on the edge. The freedom to do what you want, when you want, even if it came with the constant fear of death and danger. The life of a pirate, while filled with danger, intrigue, and the occasional thrill, ultimately has an expiration date. Whether by the hands of the Navy, an enemy pirate crew, disease, or the very sea that you've spent your life navigating, the end comes for everyone eventually. As much as pirates live for the moment, chasing treasure and avoiding the law, the inevitable reality is that the pirate's life is never one that lasts long. You've made it this far, survived the grueling labor, the constant tension, the harsh punishments, the elusive treasure. But how long can that continue? The body and mind both begin to wear down. The food and water may be scarce. Your health might begin to decline from lack of proper care, and your mental state can become just as fragile as the ship beneath your feet. It doesn't take long for even the hardiest pirates to crack under the strain. The endless cycle of work, fear, and brutality has a way of wearing a person down, and as the days turn into months, you begin to wonder how much longer you can endure this life. There are those who dream of retiring, of finally claiming enough treasure to sail off into the sunset, to live in peace, far from the chaos of pirate life. But for many, that dream is never realized. Whether by bad luck, a fatal injury, or a poorly planned raid, most pirates die before they ever get the chance to retire. Even the most successful pirates, those who amassed wealth and fame, were often brought down by the same forces that kept them going: greed, betrayal, and the constant need to survive. For those who don't die in battle or from disease, retirement often comes in a form they didn't expect. Some pirates were captured by the Navy, brought to trial, and executed. Others were marooned, stranded on some desolate island with no hope of escape. The reality of retiring from piracy is a cruel one. There's no gentle slide into a peaceful old age. Instead, pirates were either killed in the line of duty or left to die in a more pitiful fashion, far from the treasures they sought and the freedom they fought for. Historians still argue whether any pirates truly lived to old age. Some claim that there were a few pirates who managed to leave the life behind, living out their days in relative peace, often in hiding, having spent their loot to buy a quiet existence. Others argue that the very nature of piracy ensured that most pirates met violent ends. One thing is certain, though: pirates didn't live long enough to enjoy the spoils of their labor. In the end, the life of a pirate is a harsh, fleeting existence. It's a cycle of survival, constantly testing your limits, always teetering on the edge of disaster. And while it might seem like a life full of excitement and adventure, it's also a life full of hardship, pain, and an unrelenting sense of danger. The treasure that pirates sought, the freedom they craved, it all becomes meaningless in the face of the constant, brutal reality of life on the ship. So, as the sun sets on yet another day at sea, and you feel the weight of exhaustion and fear hanging over you, you begin to understand that the pirate's life, as adventurous as it may seem in stories, is ultimately a life lived in the shadow of death. And when the inevitable end comes, it will be swift, brutal, and final, just like everything else in the world of piracy. As the ship creaks under the endless rhythm of the waves, the wind now softened, your body begins to relax, your tired limbs stretching, your mind slowing to a more peaceful pace. The constant tension of life on the pirate ship, the endless struggle, fades into the background, replaced by the comforting, familiar hum of the sea. There's nothing more to worry about now. The chaos, the danger, the work, it's all drifted away. You're safe now. The sound of the gentle waves, now calm, lapping against the side of the ship, becomes a lullaby, washing away the memories of the hardships you've endured. You let the peace settle in, each breath a little deeper, a little slower. The pirate life, with all its brutality and unpredictability, is far behind you. For now, you can rest. No more running, no more fighting, just the quiet moments of the night, the cool breeze brushing against your face, and the soft sound of the water guiding you into sleep. The sea, once a place of constant danger and uncertainty, now feels like a quiet, soothing companion, and you, like the crew before you, can finally let go. With each passing second, you drift farther away from the hardships of pirate life, closer to a restful, peaceful sleep. The journey is over, and the horizon ahead is calm. No more battles, no more struggles, just tranquility. Now, with your body relaxed, your breath steady, and your mind free from the weight of survival, let yourself slip into the deep comfort of sleep. Tomorrow doesn't matter, and yesterday is a world far behind you. For now, simply rest and let the ocean's whispers carry you into a peaceful, undisturbed slumber.